our vision was for a regular fan to own music alongside with their favorite artist. And you don't need to explain anything else to get somebody to understand what that means. You don't have to go and explain what a token is and what crypto does, and they'll figure it out eventually. Like if they want, if they choose to. It's just not necessary to bring people down that road and effectively scare them sometimes, right? And so my general feeling is, again, tokens are an enabling technology, but you still have to solve a real world problem with whatever you're doing with these tokens. If you're not solving a real world problem, how can you expect people to be interested? And that's how we think about things at Royal.
Matt, what's good?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Oh, I'm fantastic, man. IRL recordings, baby.
It's always better.
Off of Riverside and Zoom.
It hits different in person.
Oh, indeed it does, man. Who we got lined up?
I'm really excited about this one. We've got Blau, acclaimed DJ producer, pioneer in the music NFT space. Also a good friend of mine who actually played a really key role in my journey into NFTs. It was a conversation with him in the fall of 2020 that led me down the NFT rabbit hole. And, he and I have always chatted about crypto things dating back even to 2016 and before. He's really been at the forefront of this technology, and he has believed in its potential to empower creators long before it was cool. And so I'm really excited to have him on the podcast today and see where his head's at, because he is now also the founder and CEO of Royal. I think one of the most exciting new music NFT platforms, actually music royalty rights market, as he would call it, in the space. And, wearing multiple hats, leading that charge. Excited to catch up with him.
Yeah, 1,000%. No, I think I absolutely love what Royal's up to. Excited that he breaks it down. I think, Royal is very much at the forefront, and I think they've made a lot of very strategic decisions that are really helping, even with it kind of aligns with a lot of our mission at NFT Now: empower the creators of culture, foster mainstream adoption around NFTs. I think the influence that music and musicians have spans far beyond what people listen to, right? I think musicians are cultural tastemakers. So I think what Royal is doing to bring musicians and their fan bases into the space and really lead with these kind of value propositions that aren't buy an NFT for the sake of an NFT, but buy an NFT so you can really invest in an artist. You can align your incentives as a fan. The use case that got me excited about NFTs too is what if when I remember I was always a fan of Lil Wayne, and Drake was his protege, and what if I had a Royal NFT of Drake back in that day? That was when it really clicked for me with NFTs, and I think Royal is really crushing that value prop and doing it in a way where it's frictionless. You don't need a credit card to set up. So I'm really excited. I think Justin Blau, Royal, is very much at the forefront of this entire movement. So for him to kind of peel back the curtains is a treat. Before we jump in, if you haven't already, do want to encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Constantly putting out behind the drop videos, mini documentaries. If you want to learn more about some of the most fascinating things that are happening in the space, be sure to go to youtube.com/NFT Now and subscribe. But without any further ado, Justin Blau.
Justin Blau, NFT Now podcast. We finally made it happen. I'm so excited to have you on, man. How's it going?
It's going great. We are at the beginning of a 5-day marathon here at NFT NYC. It's a pleasure to be here.
I love it. Well, for those who don't know, Blau was the one who introduced me to NFTs. We go back a decade. He bought me my first ledger back in 2016.
I did.
There are a lot of firsts, and so
I'm glad I still get the credit. I mean, it's good that you still give it. I'm impressed.
Oh, of course, we never forget. And has been a supporter, and we're really glad to have him on the podcast. You've been early in blockchain and music. You've been at the charge.
Someone once said to me in the Twitter Spaces that they've been in DeFi since 2011. So I don't know if I can beat that.
Right.
But no. Yeah. I mean, it's always funny, right? It's you always think that, other people who are friends with you that have been involved for a longer time, it makes you feel a little bit late, right? No matter where you are in whatever cycle. But I've been experimenting with this stuff since 2014, more seriously, in 2017 during the kind of first major ETH bull run, when I got really excited about the idea of disintermediation, decentralization as it might apply to the world of entertainment, which is why we're here today.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about that. For those who maybe don't know the whole backdrop, just give briefly a little bit of information about your entry point into the NFT space, when you realized that NFTs were going to be a game changer, and what you've done with the music industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess my journey started in like the quickest version of the story is 2014. I met the Winklevoss twins on spring break in Mexico, was kind of experiencing a lot of personal issues with the banking system as a young kid, as a DJ who wanted to, get a mortgage, didn't have any credit, right? Had a difficult time moving money around without like higher approval because you're a kid and you're at Bank of America, whatever it might be. And I was just fascinated by this idea of decentralized and frictionless value transfer with Bitcoin. And that's kind of what got me excited about crypto back in 2014, spending some time with Tyler and Cameron. And then in 17, when ETH started to kind of emerge as this, DApp-based decentralized platform, I was really excited about the idea of disintermediating music, especially as we all know, and we don't, we can go into the specifics, but I think we all know all the problems that exist and how they might be solved by a transparent, immutable ledger. And I started experimenting with NFTs specifically in 2017, 2018, more through a live music application, not even through ticketing, but more through proof of attendance and through like a reward system. So I threw a music festival called OMF in Berkeley, California at the Greek Amphitheater. We had Zed play, Big Sean, myself, Matt, and Kim. And the idea was you can earn rewards and proof of attendance tokens by going to the festival. And there was a moment where you could actually, earn a Blau NFT by scanning a QR code that I only had on my phone, and there were 50 of them. And the second I went out in the crowd, I had a security guard with me. They were gone in seconds, right? So the 50 people had claimed these, Blau loyalty tokens, let's call them, in seconds. And this was actually built on the Stellar Lumens network, and it was, a totally different time, but it was fast and it worked. And doing it on mainnet wouldn't have worked back then, might work now. But we kind of did all this stuff, and I realized really quickly, and this was in 2018 when we actually launched the product, I realized that like people love this concept of digital scarcity, especially when it's visual. It made a lot of sense. But at the time in 2018, the bear market had kind of settled in, and people stopped building as much. It was a darker time, and we decided we threw this one festival. It was a great success, and that I'd always kind of keep my fascination and passion with the technology on the back burner until the rest of the world kind of got it. Fast forward to COVID 2020, and I started seeing NFTs manifest in a different light. As opposed to loyalty and attendance, that the manifestation through art became really popular and was popularized by Xcopy, Trevor Jones, and Pac. And I was kind of watching what was happening on Nifty Gateway and Super Rare, and starting to think to myself, well, how could this really work for music as an art form? And started experimenting with some of the first music NFTs in 20. There were other like projects prior to me, but I think as a mainstream artist, it was myself and RAC that were just really excited about experimenting with the technology. And RAC and I had gone way back to 2017 days. I mean, there weren't that many musicians that were excited about this stuff back then. And we just started with experiments, and I teamed up with my art director. I, basically put out some unreleased music with visual art attached to it, and it sold. And we were just mind blown by the fact that these scarce digital assets had value to people. And really, that emotional value of, owning an unreleased song, or at least being able to listen to and feeling like you have ownership of an unreleased song, really fascinated me. And that was really, I guess 2020, summer of 2020 is when I started kind of re-engaging in the space after 2017. And, we saw the explosion kind of happen following a lot of, Nifty Gateway activity with myself, people, and a bunch of other artists, into that accelerated into 2021. And then, of course, apes and everything else, and PFPs, and here we are a year later.
Absolutely amazing, man. And we'd love for you just to dive into that kind of Ultraviolet album sale. I think it sold for nearly $12 million, and was definitely like a massive wake up call for the music industry. Like, this is no joke. We need to figure out and learn more.
Yeah. So in the experimentation that I kind of viewed all of my earlier NFT sales as really just experiments, right? With like no expectation of profit really at all. And so we designed this auction. I started doing these unreleased music NFTs in 2020. And then in 2021, I was like, well, what might this look like for existing music that's out, right? Like how can we, figure out ways that fans can co-own music with their favorite artists? And so I did a single in January on Nifty Gateway that was a song of mine called Everything. The one of one was the Spotify canvas that you see when you listen to the song on Spotify. So only one person owns that video, which is like really interesting concept. And a lot of these things started out as experiments. But in February, when I did this auction, it was the first time that I had done something for an album. And the idea was you got a combination of different tokens that represented different songs on the album by bidding in this ranked auction. And the idea, economics, having studied economics in college, was how do you capture an entire demand curve? With a regular auction, there's only one winner, but someone was still willing to pay that second highest bid. How can you leverage NFTs to capture everyone's willingness to pay, and where there could be multiple winners? And of course, our expectations. This was, on my own website. I built the technology with one of my portfolio companies, Origin Protocol, and we just wanted to do something on our own independently, and it just exploded. We had zero expectations. Did a Clubhouse room, did a little bit of marketing on my website. And yeah, the auction ended up netting about $12 million. And it was the first 8-figure NFT sale ever at the time. And, 3 weeks following, people did his $69 million sale with Christie's. And I think those two events definitely led to the explosion of interest in, just let's call it the financial side of what was possible.
Absolutely. And I remember this well because I remember chatting with you in the lead up to that. And then in the aftermath when everyone in the music industry was trying to get a hold of you. Tell us.
It was a dark time. I should have been celebrating, but it was just, it was an honor, right? There are all these amazing, powerful players who wanted to learn how to use the technology. And I tried to be really honest in saying look, I don't know how this happened. I couldn't replicate this again. And that's what I said to everyone. And I said, really, the technology that I want to see exist in the world doesn't exist yet. Yeah. And that's when, that kind of inspired some of the initial ideas for Royal. What could it mean to actually own IP in a song? What if your fans were your actual collaborators on ownership in a record instead of this idea of synthetic ownership of a song, which is, still interesting. Collectible music is interesting. You've got CDs and vinyl, and there's a culture around that. But really unlocking substantial financial upside could exist in true ownership. And it was something that was really, really hard. And Fred Arizim, one of the co-founders of Coinbase, my lead investor, who was also the founder of Paradigm, basically convinced me to start Royal to kind of try to solve this problem where the tools didn't really exist for an artist to have fans become their record label, so to speak, right? That was kind of the inspiration for Royal. And that was a year ago, a year, or I should say 13 months ago. So that started the kind of next chapter of the journey.
That's wild. That's wild. We always say weeks are months and months are years in the space. So much has happened in that time. And I love actually hearing the thought process and the line from your early NFT releases, trying to get fans invested in it, have fans have the sense of ownership. That really is in line with the guiding mission of Royal. And I hadn't necessarily connected the two explicitly like that before. I love how you said that. For those who are listening, just tell us a little bit more about Royal and what you're building there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Royal is a company that I started with my best friend, JD Ross, from college. JD started many other companies in his life, notably Open Door, which is a publicly traded company that kind of disrupted the real estate world. And I called him with the idea for Royal. The idea is really simple. Let fans invest in music as an asset class and participate in the economic upside that an artist achieves as they grow in popularity, right? So just opening up an entire asset class to a new audience. And if you look at it, the only people who have been able to invest in music IP are record labels, private equity, and of course the artists themselves. They hold it. But most people don't understand that a lot of artists that talk about, not really getting paid a lot from music fail to understand that they just don't own a lot of it, right? And so we want to inspire artists to own and maintain as much, creative control of their music as possible and as much IP ownership as possible. And, you take artists like Russ, who's maintained that ownership throughout his career, and he makes a lot of money from music. So what happens now when you connect fans to owning music as well, right? How do those incentives change? Are fans more likely to spread the word about that music, to tell their friends, to be incentivized to make that artist grow and feel like they're a part of that growth? Whereas otherwise, the fan experience actually gets worse as an artist gets more popular. Tickets get more expensive. You have less interactions with that artist over time, right? So the idea of, being a part of an artist's core collective, fans, from the start, and having economic upside in that artist popularity was always so fascinating to me. And that's what we set out to build with Royal.
So super excited to see how you continue to iterate and evolve and kind of come up with new value propositions for fans as to how this can create and innovate upon the connection between a fan and an artist. I know a lot of the current value proposition is investing early in a fan, but also being able to actually get a share of royalties that are generated off of traditional streaming platforms. I'm curious if you feel like the current streaming, the artists often get 0.003 cents per stream. Do you feel that model is already a bit inherently broken?
A lot of people talk about how the streaming model is broken, and my kind of antithetical view is just that no one understands how much those 3 or 4 cents are being divided before they get into an artist's hands. If you own a lot of that and your music makes generates millions of streams, there are many artists that are making very, very real incomes from their music, assuming it's popular. You also kind of have this giant misconception that people use all the time in trying to explain why streaming is broken, and they say, well, only 10 or 15% of all the artists on Spotify make 95% of the money. That's literally true of every single business in the world. Like every creator, like YouTube, TikTok, where like it's just true of every long tail world in entertainment. And so realistically, right, if you do own your music and it becomes popular, there is real money in owning that IP. That is why record labels sign these aggressive deals with artists so that they can capture all of that value, right? And so the idea behind Royal is, why not share that value with the people that create it, the fans? Ultimately, they're the ones who spread the popularity. And the only way that gets proven out is like over time, right? Like when an artist comes and issues assets on Royal and then they explode in popularity, everyone will see an actual economic benefit. We think that's really powerful. And that's kind of the model that we hope to convey to the world.
Yeah. Just to double down briefly there, because that's fascinating. I mean, there's obviously a lot more opportunity and even just power in the artist's hands if they're independent. And I think like NFTs create more economic viability off smaller audiences. When you think about you've done a range. I mean, you had an incredible job with Verite, then you're also working with Chainsmokers, Diplo, kind of across a broad spectrum. Verite has been independent. Those guys definitely have deals. Like, do you see with the vision of Royal, figuring out how to navigate that label conversation, or really just trying to create a better model for independent artists?
The beauty of Royal is that we don't tokenize audio files, and I think it's like a big like Royal is not a music NFT platform. People kind of put that out there in the universe. We're a music rights marketplace and music rights platform. So if you're an artist and you own, let's say you've done a deal, but you still own 20% of a song, and let's assume that song is recouped, whether it's recouped or not, you as an artist have the right to do whatever you want with that 20%. Right. And so at Royal, our tokens are visual, like pieces of visual art that represent ownership, and then ownership in the underlying IP of the music. The tokens actually don't point to the audio at all. And that's mainly because there are certain IP clearances that are necessary that would be blockers for everyone to participate in the ecosystem. Collectible audio is really interesting for independent artists to get involved, to like get their feet wet and get involved with collectors and owners that want to kind of donate to their experience. But those collectors aren't really getting any ownership in return. It's like it's ownership should be defined as social consensus or legal tender. That is like a very specific definition. So what do you own when you own an NFT is a very big question. At Royal, you own rights, right? And I think that's really important. With Bored Apes, and the reason why Bored Apes took off so much and why I was very excited about the initial mint was it was the first project that actually gave you a license to use your ape when you bought that NFT. And we're just beginning to scratch the surface of what that looks like. But true digital ownership is, to me, so much more significant than synthetic digital ownership. The idea that this token points to an image or whatever it might point to, it could point to anything in the metadata, right? Literally anything. Unless you actually own something related to it, what does that ownership really mean, right? And I think that's like a big kind of realization that a lot of people are having today.
Makes total sense. And, I think back to our initial call about NFTs quite a bit. And one of the things that you said that really kind of like put a light bulb moment for me was when you explained how in traditional music, streaming, let's say you had a show in Mexico City, you have this many thousand streams from people in Mexico City every month on Spotify, but you have no way of reaching them. And NFTs enable you this direct connection with you and your fans. And that really resonated. And I'd love to hear you kind of expound on that a little bit and tell a bit about how you see NFTs and this technology really fundamentally changing the relationship between artists and fans.
100%. So aside from the idea of like maintaining true ownership, the biggest like two variables that got me really excited about the intersection of distributed ledger tech and music, like from 2017 even, was this idea of like an artist not being able to control any of the data they generate, right? So with tokens, I at least know there's a wallet address associated with a human being behind that wallet address who I know is a fan. When I go sell tickets or create stream counts, right? I have absolutely zero data sharing on any of those people. So I've done over like 1.5 billion streams across platforms, and I've done probably over 500,000 ticket sales individually, and I have no idea who those people are. So how am I supposed to reach them? The idea of tokens in creating that more transparent, immutable bond between a creator and a consumer of that creativity is inherently interesting regardless of the ownership variable, right? And the ownership variable just makes that connection more sincere. And so what we're exploring at Royal is like all of the other ways that relationship can be, improved via token. And it's something that, like, again, we're just beginning to scratch the surface on.
And in that vein, like when it comes to changing the fan experience, like I think it's fascinating because it creates this deeper sense of ownership, loyalty, ambassadorship, because there really is this kind of more deeply aligned incentives and interests with artists and fans in this model. What are other ways in which you feel like this will really enhance the relationship between a fan and an artist?
I think artists can get so creative with how they explore this Web3 world and all the tools that are created within it, right? So, you think about everything that's happening in the blockchain world at large, and it's all tools. It's all tools. At the end of the day, an artist has to kind of use those tools to their own end, to their own creative vision. And we've seen tons of things. Like in my case, some of the winners of that Ultraviolet auction have all access passes for life. 4 of them came backstage at EDC Las Vegas. An experience that's kind of priceless and really, really special. And a lot of those collectors / owners have seen that kind of special value that exists. But the tools to kind of handle a lot of this redemption on chain are still new and expensive at scale, right? So like if you've got a big artist like Ye who wants to do something with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, as ETH mainnet you can only mint about 70 to 90 NFTs per block. And you're looking at a problem. You're looking at a big scalability problem. And so I'm most excited for some of these other solutions, whether they're EVM compatible or other layer ones or whatever they might be. I'm excited for these solutions to unlock the potential and to make it really, easier for users to engage with tokens, right? Because today, let's just be honest, setting up everything you need to set up to get involved in crypto is difficult. It's way too difficult. It's not as simple as setting up an email. It's kind of adjacent to what setting up your dial-up internet looked like back in the 90s, right? And so we need to do better, but we're at a point now where there's so much interest in the public eye, and you've got the next generation of college grads who have studied computer science, who are really excited about learning Solidity, about learning Rust, about learning these coding languages, and they're going to build the tools of the future. And I think the next 5 years, we're going to see insane development on this front, more than we've ever seen historically.
Yeah, makes total sense. And like you said, early is a relative term, right? Even though like you were early, we are still early in the aggregate sense. And you think about it, the majority of music fans are not yet in this world. How do we reach them? How do we get them really involved? How do we get beyond some of these misconceptions that are preventing artists from entering the space? And also, these UX issues that are preventing fans from staying in the space?
I think it's both. I think it's both narrative and UX, 1000%. And I think it's something that everybody's working on, right? Like fans, at least in the context of Royal, people do understand what it means to own a piece of a song. I was in Austin, which is where the Royal headquarters is, looking at a place to rent so that I didn't have to stay in hotels every time I went there. And the realtor that was showing me around, asked what I did, and I said we started this company called Royal, and it enables you to invest in music. It's like, oh, does that mean like invest in music? Like, do I own like rights in like a song? I'm like, yeah. He's like, could I invest in Freebird by Leonard Skinner? I was like, if Leonard Skinner wanted to sell you some Freebird, then absolutely. And like that principle, crypto aside, like I didn't have to say anything about NFTs or crypto. That made sense to someone, right? And so I've always said everything that happens in distributed ledger tech land, it's all enabling technology, the way the internet is, right? Like the internet creates, or eliminates, I should say, information asymmetry and can create marketplaces, can create connections between humans, all of the same things that blockchains do. The special part about blockchains is it's all community owned. And it's also mostly immutable and mostly transparent. Those are two things that, Web 2 don't necessarily do. And so like when you take this transparency and this communal ownership mentality and all these things, and you apply it to any creative world, the benefits become, beyond anyone's imagination. And so, I think UX is a blocker, huge blocker. Like making someone set up a wallet is hard. But guiding them through the process of it is less hard. Like my mom still has a really hard time using an Apple computer and like doesn't know how to adjust the brightness of something. And like, over time, we teach each other. The problem is even teaching a friend how to set up a wallet is hard, and how to use it is hard, and how to stay secure and safe with sovereign kind of ownership is hard, right? And so like all these variables are things that, developers and builders are working on. And as we kind of enter this next chapter of what happens in crypto, I think we're going to come out of it stronger than we've ever been before.
For sure. And it's exciting to see too, because I think like you guys have more than a lot of other like marketplaces taken this approach to kind of help alleviate some of the friction, having the fiat on ramp. I also think it's really interesting too from a perspective of like even just in marketing and positioning, like you're not mentioning like NFTs or Web3 really at all in a lot of the core value proposition, and I think that's refreshing because I think over time we'll see it become like nobody calls like, yo, check out this new wave file or MP3 when they hear a song. So I think like we'll see this shift towards invisibility of the underlying tech. Can you talk a little bit about the intentionality of not leading with that from a marketing perspective? I think there's a lot of really valuable lessons there for other people that are building NFT projects.
Yeah, it's worked for us. I think it's worked for us in that, our vision was for a regular fan to own music with their favorite artist. And you don't need to explain anything else to get somebody to understand what that means. You don't have to go and explain what a token is and what crypto does, and they'll figure it out eventually. Like if they want, if they choose to. It's like, does everybody go look at the source code of every website they go to? No. Like it's just not necessary to bring people down that road and effectively scare them sometimes, right? And so having done this for at least been involved in, let's call it, experimenting with non-fungible token technology for 5 years, the one thing that I learned early on is the second I used the word NFT, the whole world, like this is pre this current, well, whatever you want to call it. There's an interview of me on Fox Business News using the word NFT in 2018, and the guy like literally like looks the other way and has no idea what I'm talking about. So how could you expect that to really change that much? It hasn't, believe it or not. Even though like the word is at peak public awareness, the understanding of what it means is still very, very, very minimal. And when we use this word, when we use this phrase non-fungible token, it actually doesn't mean that much in the sense that like the only reason why this phrase exists is because tokens are typically fungible in the real world and on blockchains, or they have been prior to ERC 721. Fungibility means like kind, right? Even dollar bills are actually non-fungible. They have serial numbers. But the non-fungibility of dollars doesn't create marginal value. Like if I have a $100 bill and you have a $100 bill, they have different serial numbers. Unless your lucky numbers are like the serial number of my dollar, you don't really want it. Like who cares, right? And so the issue is like non-fungibility doesn't imply value. It just doesn't. The thing that implies value is authenticity, proof of authenticity, right? That's interesting. And using a unique ID to prove authenticity is extremely, extremely interesting. That's why we have certificates of authenticity for diamonds and for art and for all other types, and for land deeds, right? Now we apply that through the lens of art and things get really interesting. But, my general feeling is, again, tokens are an enabling technology, but you still have to solve a real world problem with whatever you're doing with these tokens. If you're not solving a real world problem, how can you expect people to be interested? And that's how we think about things at Royal.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. I know you have gotten this question a lot, and I'm sure that you encounter it a lot in your work with Royal as well. But I think it's an important one because there are so many people still trying to understand and enter the space. What advice do you have for musicians and music artists who are looking to get into NFTs and Web3?
I think my advice to musicians and artists is ask yourself why. If it's money, maybe wait a little bit. Because a lot of the technology that will create the value for the buyers barely exists. And what I mean by that is like this concept of quote unquote utility, right? Like everybody throws the word around the way they did back with utility tokens in 2017. It's really hard to achieve a lot of that value for a lot of these companies today. It's not ready yet. It's not frictionless yet. And so if you want to create value for people who buy something from you, meaningfully, study the technology and maybe wait. If you understand the limitations and still have really cool ideas, then go for it. But I would say a lot of stuff isn't ready yet, and there's a giant oversaturation problem. And it's the same way that if you're a musician and you're going and you're selling tickets for a show, you want the production to be at the highest level. You want the fans to have an amazing experience. And if they don't, are they going to come back next time? And you really need to ask yourself that question. And in Jimmy Iovine's words from a recent call that I did with him, if you're running a fish market and you're selling bad fish, who's to say people will come back to the fish market a second time? It's like one of the best analogies I'd ever heard. I was like, exactly. So that's my advice to any artist that's trying to get involved in the space. And unless you really know what value you're creating and you're selling something of meaning and quality to someone, I would wait until some of the technology is there, because it's really hard to build it yourself too. And that's kind of what we do at Royal. We're ideally building the technology that makes it easier for everyone to get involved.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And then when it comes to like, I'm curious how you feel this will impact the music industry over time. Like, I think right now, like obviously there's been some really fascinating use cases, whether it's artists that are effectively crowdfunding the modern day version of Advance and don't necessarily have to sign away as much ownership or any ownership for that matter. I know some labels are a little more, they embrace change a little more and are figuring out how to navigate the space. Others will be laggards in the space. What business models or what elements of like the traditional and current music industry do you feel like are at risk with the rise of NFTs?
I feel like everything can be kind of symbiotic. I don't know how at risk certain things are, because like a lot of people say, a lot of people ask us like, what are we trying to disrupt? The reality is we're just trying to free artists and give artists more independence. That doesn't necessarily have to be at the expense of any other player. I think that a lot of it is creating a layer on top of the existing music world that does give artists that freedom of choice. They don't necessarily have that today. The only place that can come from is from the grassroots, as it always has in music, in any art form, right? Like grassroots can create so much momentum and value for a musician, and for any artist for that matter. And so I would say the real kind of winning companies' ideas are the ones that empower artists without thinking too much about who the enemy is, because sometimes it's hard to know. Like there are lots of musicians that are a part of these like giant deals that have benefited greatly. There's a lot of artists that haven't, and it's really about giving them the choice more so than attacking an existing infrastructure that, mind you, works. It just doesn't work for the little guy yet, and empowering those little guys to achieve success on their own is the ultimate priority that I think everyone has in Web3.
Do you feel like NFTs will become like a top 3 revenue stream for music artists by, say, 2025, 2030?
I don't think of NFTs as necessarily a revenue stream. I kind of envision them as they are ultimately proof of ownership, and what someone owns is where the value is derived from. And so like saying NFTs are a revenue stream, yeah, maybe. I mean, they have been for, and again, this is like for digital artists, there's skeuomorphism and there's like an analogous situation with the real world where owning a print or owning a one-of-one piece of physical art very much adjacently follows the activity that's happened in the art world of NFTs. Like it's familiar. In music, it's not. Music is invisible. The closest thing you get to is owning a vinyl. It's about the closest thing you get to collectability in the real world. And so, well, what does that mean? Are NFT sales going to ever dwarf, like Harry Styles posted some crazy number with vinyl sales? Like, could I ever see a world where that happens with like collectible audio? I just don't think so. I don't, because music is invisible. It's a different medium of consuming anything. Do you own the food that you eat after you consume it? Do you own the perfume or the cologne from Le Labo? Do you own the audio that you hear? Well, Le Labo has the formula for remaking your thing, and you have to go into the store for a refill. The food, you got to go to the restaurant every time. Does that mean you own it? Well, I mean, in the moments that it's there, but it fades. The same way audio in the moments that you're listening to it. What do you own after?
Right, it's ephemeral.
Exactly. And so it's just a different medium of ownership. And that's what we're exploring so heavily at Royal.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm curious too, when it comes to there's a whole range of different models, and I know we spoke a little bit about how artists can kind of do it differently, but there really have been like a couple core models that have emerged in the space as to how musicians can think about releasing NFTs. You have like the art based, where it is very much collectible music, modern day like vinyl. Then there's the utility, modern day fan club. You even mentioned too, for your own Ultraviolet drop, being able to give people private meet and greets. And then there's also kind of the other element of utility and actually purchasing a kind of share of the royalties. Like, do you feel like there will be just a repeatable model that'll emerge? Or do you think it very much is kind of like case by case, like every artist experiments?
I think it's case by case, because artists know their audience and every audience is different. Mm-hmm. Like at Royal, we believe that the ownership layer is the most important fundamental layer, and that you can kind of build on all those other things on like above the ownership layer. Right. But without the ownership layer, you might not need a blockchain to achieve some of these things. True. And I think that's like where things get a little bit weird. Yeah. you probably don't need a blockchain to start a fan club.
Yeah.
In fact, a blockchain might overcomplicate fan clubs, and fan clubs historically like don't perform that well.
Yeah.
But when you own something with your favorite artist, and now everyone's incentivized in the same way, a community emerges from that co-ownership. It is a byproduct of, and not the purpose for, these tokens.
Totally.
I think that's like how I think about it. But
Yeah.
you know, people have their own philosophies about it. I
Yeah.
kind of this is kind of mine. If
Yeah.
that makes sense.
No, for sure. I love it.
No, it makes total sense. Well, let's look ahead a bit. What do you have coming up for Royal? What's coming up for you as well? I know you have a lot in the works always, so fill us in on what you can.
So on my end, I got to finish some of the new music that I've been working on. It's taken a while having running both roles as CEO and occasional musician,
Can you
but mostly
dive
CEO.
deeper there too? Like, what is
That
that
is
like
interesting,
balance?
yeah.
Like, I think there's
Dude, it's all Royal right now. Royal's my entire life. And like sometimes on weekends I try to work on music. But so I definitely need to finish some. But on the Royal side, like we're accelerating. We have a lot of amazing musicians right now. It's been extremely curated, but our goal is to open up the platform to anyone.
yeah,
Right, like everyone's asking like, when can we do something, and really it's just about building the technology, making sure it's secure, making sure nothing crashes, and creating the best experience for both artists and fans. And that's just going to take time,
yeah,
as it did with Uber, Airbnb, or any other company.
right,
And we're working as fast as possible to open the platform to every artist. And in the short term, we're curating artists that we believe have extremely strong narratives and strong fan bases who are excited about co-ownership. They could be big and small. We just did drop with Cartoon, an Estonian, D&B group, right? Who sold out. All of our drops have sold out thus far. There will be a time that maybe there's not enough demand for that specific artist that we're selling, and that's like totally okay.
yeah,
Because in the end, we want people to be able to buy music rights and invest in music whenever they want to, not just at these moments of a drop, which we feel is like just an incorrect way of thinking about how tokens work and how ownership works, right?
yeah,
The same way you can go buy ownership in anything today in an open marketplace. Like we strive to create that marketplace.
yeah. That's awesome. It's super exciting. And I mean, when it comes to like as more and more as we do start to foster more mainstream adoption beyond just Royal, but just generally as far as like applications of NFTs and Web3 technology, do you think we'll be in like an omni-chain world? Like I know,
Yeah, I think so. I mean, a lot of blockchains add value in different ways, and I see no reason why many can't be a part of the future. And I think like whatever chain tokens live on today, you look at a lot of the development that's happening with ZK, with other layer twos, Optimism, Arbitrum. There's problems across the board, but things are getting so much better, and I think like people tend to be a little bit impatient, and this stuff is brand new technology. The same way, I remember getting on my first FaceTime being like, holy, like I can see someone else talking in my phone. Like this is nuts.
Yeah.
Like it's nuts, right?
Yeah.
And like we're barely scratching the surface here. So I think everyone has to be open,
Right.
and shouldn't be a maxi at this stage because it's too early to be a maxi. Like we don't really know where things will go. And I think being open-minded is the most important variable.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And you've always been really forward-looking. What are you excited about? And from a technological development standpoint, what are you paying attention to this bear market? Like what are you kind of honing in on, and where do you think like what are the innovations that you think will shape what the next chapter of this looks like?
On the non-technical side of things and focusing more on NFTs and entertainment, I would say, ZK. I think ZK rollups are a mega solution for a lot of the problems that we experience. I think that like debunking the myth of secondary royalties being baked into smart contracts is probably important. Marketplaces, becoming more efficient. OpenSea launching Seaport is an incredible development. Like you're seeing so much that will be the base layer infrastructure for the future of this. And we've, the past year has only been the first wave for NFTs. It took other cryptocurrencies and DeFi and all these other applications years to develop. We're basically at year one of true innovation of non-fungible related marketplaces and tokens is what I would say. Even though like the tech's been around for longer than that, we're at year one of like peak development and interest, and or maybe 1.5 years, whatever that might be. So the future is bright. I'm excited.
Yeah. No, I'm curious too, as we start coming towards the close, like when it does come right now, and I'm sure you encounter this a lot when you're speaking with different like artist teams, like fortunately you're probably in a spot where it's by the time you guys are having conversations, like there's some level of like openness and interest in the space, but there's also a lot of like just general hesitance from artists, from fans. They think NFTs are a bad word. The second an artist talks about NFTs, their fans think it's a scam. What do you think it's going to take in order to kind of change some of the general public perception in this mainstream market?
I think the short answer to that is just like people selling stuff that's real and not synthetic. Yeah. And when things that are real are sold and value is attained, no one complains. Yeah. And that needs to happen. Yeah.
Amen.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
You know?
And I remember actually, I remember having a conversation early on. It was after your sale. It was after kind of the floodgates were starting to open. It was after Beeple, and I believe in our conversation, you were, I think it was almost a little bit prescient in a sense. And you were saying like, you saw how this could build into something similar to like the ICO boom.
I did say that.
You did say that.
I did.
And arguably,
take some credit.
Yeah, and arguably, if you look at what played out with like the hype cycles and the PFPs and like the scam projects and the like I think there is a direct parallel. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like what lessons we can learn now, like looking forward from where we've been and how we can kind of make it a more a safer space for newcomers and a place where quality rises to the top.
Yeah, I it's so funny. Human behavior repeats itself like clockwork, and you can say things till you're blue in the face and you just hope people listen. But if there's anything I could say, it's don't do it for the money. Like honestly, if you create impact, money comes. If you're intending on speculating, you're at risk with anything in life. How you spend your time, how you spend your money, what you put your money in, it's all calculated risk. And I think the problem is people forget to do the calculating part. So, do the calculation, see, understand whenever you make a choice that there is no guarantee, no matter how credible the friend that told you a good choice is or not. And I think that like, I could preach it till I'm blue in the face. It doesn't mean people are going to listen. But prepare for anything. Like, I don't think any of us who've been around, and Matt, you have too. Like, I don't think any of us knew shit was going to explode like this. I certainly didn't. I said maybe I could see this exploding into an ICO type thing, and then I actually think that this was worse. In many ways. And so people learn their lessons, and the reality is like I just hope they stick around, right? I think there are a lot of people that have gotten burned in some way, shape, or form, and I hope that they still, in their experience playing with the technology, playing with MetaMask, trading, whatever they were doing, I hope that they felt how powerful the tech is, and if they did, hopefully they will stick around. And if they do, I hope that they make their money back. I think for all of us who've been around the block for a minute, it's very clear that just like believing in the technology is the core value that, people who stick around have, and most have in some way, shape, or form achieved success. It's never guaranteed. But just pure belief in the tech matters the most. And so I think that would be my advice is if you really do believe in it, stick around. And if you don't, wait till next time. And, if you don't, that's also okay, because a lot of this shit's not ready yet.
There it is. Well, Justin, always a pleasure chatting with you. Really enjoyed this conversation, and excited to see what lies on the horizon for both you and Royal.
Hell yeah. And proud to be an early investor in NFT now.
We are very appreciative.
Let's get it.
Let's go.
I appreciate your support, man. Man, well, that was an incredible episode. Love seeing him float artistically as a musician, but also just being sharp when it comes to his business. What stood out to you, man?
He has always been really good at breaking down complex parts of this world into simple and easy to understand terms. I think back to the days on Clubhouse when he really played a key role in onboarding a lot of people and helping people understand this technology. And I think that really shone through in this conversation. I really enjoyed hearing him talk about how he sees the future. how he understands how this technology will change the nature of the relationship between artists and fans. I think he's totally on it when he thinks about sort of like the actual mechanics of the industry, from streaming to live and beyond, and where this can all fit in. And I'm really excited to see the path that he charts as he continues to build.
Yeah, 1,000%. I was super excited about this company, what he's up to. Very excited too, just to create a more prosperous model for musicians. I think within the current structure and industry, it's really hard to thrive. You need to be an elite artist, and I think stuff like this not only helps fans better align incentives and be able to engage with their favorite artists in new ways, but also just creates kind of more economic viability for artists that might not be at this superstar phase, which I think is just really fascinating. So excited to see Royal continue to be a force at fostering mainstream adoption around NFTs, and grateful we were able to chop it up with the man himself.
You and me both.
That's right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. As always, we'll be back next week. Until then, we out.
It's different in person.
Y'all have to go to the split screen.
Do we do it to the camera?
Because I got a camera here.